I have a boat in my shop now, Fisher. I believe Fisher is it's an earlier dispro. I've known this boat for a long, long time. I knew the previous owner, Ron Hill, fabulous guy who was one of the pioneers in the resurrection of these dispros. This particular boat, I used to travel with Ron. Sometimes he was one of the guys who introduced me to dispro tripping on Georgian Bay. I've been up near Killarney with this boat out on the bay. Anyway, Ron is unfortunately no longer with us, but the boat is still here. The current custodian has asked me to varnish the boat. So I thought this would be a good video because there are a lot of boats. I mean, I've got boats that I've restored 30 years ago and have not been varnished, and I've looked at them and like they're beyond the point where they can just have a couple of freshen up coats. They probably have to be stripped now. So this is a bit of an owner's job that nobody really wants to do because essentially I have to take the whole boat apart to sand it. The other thing is the device. I will probably not take the device out because that's kind of a big job. It can open a can of worms if you do that. This is an earlier boat. If you notice, it's got 8-inch rib spacing. The 8-inch rib spacing is how they started off. When they were building rowboats, 8 inches were fine. And then when the dispro was an evolution from the rowboat. The device here is one of the earlier devices. It's a ratchet type device. There's no mechanical brake. It's just a ratchet. The other difference is the top is curved. It does not have a flat top. One thing about, I believe this boat is 1919. One thing about the earlier boats is they did not use copper nails. They used galvanized iron nails, which are actually a lot stronger than copper. So with the iron nails, it was adequate with 8-inch rib spacing. But then about 1920, they decided that it was a marketing problem selling a boat with iron nails in it. So they went to copper and they stuck with the 8-inch rib spacing. There are a few boats in 1920 that they built with 8-inch rib spacing and copper nails, and they quickly discovered that the copper nails would eventually loosen up and the boats were leakers. So that's when about 1921, they switched to 4-inch rib spacing, which was adequate with the copper nails. And unfortunately, the 4-inch rib spacing, it led to a lot of unintended consequences and complications that made the boats very a lot more expensive, and probably ultimately led to the downfall. The problem I've always avoided iron-nailed boats like the plague, because if somebody has sanded these too aggressively, they've sanded the galvanizing off, and then the iron nails rust. Actually, the last iron-fastened boat I worked on, all of the nails were pretty well just dissolved, and it was leaking, and it's just one of those things. I mean, these days they want to know what's the boat worth and what's it going to cost. I'm just doing these videos because one day somebody is going to rediscover how fabulous these boats are, and they're going to need a starting point, which I didn't have when I got into this. Actually, Ron Hill, the fellow who owned this boat, was a shop teacher in Toronto. Very, very talented guy. He is the guy who found this boat actually at a yard sale in Toronto. And he was one of the first guys who actually started restoring boats that were beyond ability to restore. Or at the time, most people thought, well, it can't be fixed. But Ron was one of the guys who could do things like he had the sense of cause and effect where he could figure out how to take the stem out of a boat. Obviously, he didn't do that on this boat. This is a very original boat. But the varnish has kind of lost its shine, and it just needs to be sanded in a couple of coats, and it'll be good for another 25 years. The one thing, in the fall, the current custodian of the boat said it wasn't running and had to tow it here. So that's one thing I've discovered about this business is I'm usually the guy with the biggest bill, so when it doesn't run, I get the phone call. So I think the first thing I'm going to do before I start taking this apart is just make sure there's nothing really major going on with the engine here. I think Ron did this. This is actually really kind of a cool thing, so you can see the engine while it's running. This boat, actually, when I knew the boat, when Ron had it, it had a twin-cylinder Waterman in it. A lot of people are afraid of twins. Both of my boats are actually twin-cylinder boats. They're the thing about a twin is they burn about an exponential amount of gas to a single. It's probably 3 times as much gas, and you get 1 mile an hour more speed out of them. So before Ron passed away, the last few years he had the boat, he engaged my uncle Paul Doddington to restore a Dispro Model E and replace the engine. So the engine beds are still original, but the engine is sitting a little bit further forward. I'll get some more shots of that later. But the first thing I'm going to do, take all the seats out, and then I'll have a quick look at the engine and see if I can figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's as simple as a plugged gas line. Other times it could be a timer problem. It's funny how most fuel problems are ignition related. So anyway, I'm going to put the camera down and I'm going to get a bunch of the seats out and we'll have a look at it and see if I can get it to fire. Okay, I'm just going to make sure there's nothing major mechanically wrong. So I'm going to turn on the gas. It's standard. I've got the ignition on, turned on the gas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to prime it. Take it out to the notch here. Close the priming cup. Have the ignition retarded. Give it a bit of grease. What this does is it increases the compression. Oh, I see. This one, see, when this boat was a twin, it had an extra grease cup down here. That's why I thought it was spinning. So anyway, I'll just give it a bit of grease and see if we can get it to fire. Okay, now the owner did say that it would start, but it would not run that well, so it most likely is the fuel system or maybe a carburation issue, but I'll have a look at that later. What I'm going to do now is I have to take everything out of the boat, which is a bit of an onerous job, so we'll just carry on with that.